Terence Crawford defeated Canelo Alvarez in dominant fashion and became the first fighter in history to be a three-time undisputed champion in 3 different weight classes. But how did he manage to deal with the legendary Canelo so easily? As I said in my prediction before the fight, the narrative that Alvarez is the bigger man with devastating knockout power is a myth. If you look at the actual size of the fighters, it's clear that in almost every aspect, Terence is bigger. In terms of knockout percentage and overall win ratio, Crawford also surpasses Canelo. In my previous video, I said that Canelo's raw power isn't as great as the media likes to portray. I even gave the example of Dimitri Bivol's interview right after his win over Canelo.
How hard does Saul actually hit? Like, is it really that powerful that everyone just goes down? Or maybe in his own weight class. Yeah, maybe that's true. But for light heavyweight, that's a whole different.
He hits hard in light heavyweight too, though. Yeah, but he doesn't have that natural power. He hits hard because he really tries to hit hard, you know. If I wind up just like he does, yeah, and really try to hit with all my strength, of course my punch wouldn't be much weaker, maybe even stronger. But we all know there are people who just box calmly, throw a jab or a right hand, not even trying to hit hard, but their punches are like rocks. They're just really, really uncomfortable to take. He doesn't have that. I can't say that all his punches are heavy, but if he winds up, well, he just throws with everything he's got, you know, he just openly swings. Of course, when you swing openly like that, yeah, it's powerful.
But that's about it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, if I really wind up, I can hit hard too, but overall, I don't really hit that hard. If I'm just throwing punches,
yeah,
I'm not really hitting hard. There are people who are just born with heavy hands.
But he's more like, you know, just a tough guy.
He's the kind of tough guy who's ready to really put everything into his punches, yeah. But it's not like he was born with that natural power. I think Golovkin, on the other hand, has more of that natural strength. He might be a bit slow at times, but you can see that even when he doesn't seem to be trying to hit hard, his punches still come out heavy. But with Alvarez, you can tell he really wants to hit hard.
Canelo's knockouts were always the product of technique, not brute force.
How hard did he hit?
He didn't hit as hard as I thought he was. You know, he's definitely technical, but, you know, I've been hit harder.
That's why it was always hard for him to stop technically sound fighters, like Golovkin, Bivol, Jacobs, Mayweather, and now Crawford. It was Canelo's technical superiority that allowed him to climb through weight divisions. He was moving up to fight less technically equipped opponents, beating them with skills rather than raw strength. That's how he even made it to light heavyweight, where he knocked out Sergey Kovalev. But even in that fight, on the scorecards, Canelo was losing to a well-past-his-prime Kovalev before the KO. And when he finally met someone technically superior in Dimitri Bivol, Canelo lost. That's why his last 4 opponents were basically B-level fighters. Sure, they had plenty of wins on their records, but technically they were limited, with obvious gaps in skill. And even against them, Canelo couldn't finish anyone. He only won by decision. It's easy to explain. Saul has been boxing his whole life, and now he's approaching his late 30s. He's not the same peak Canelo of 2015, the one who used to pressure opponents, set up counters, and unleash heavy 4 to 5 punch combinations. These days, Saul has adapted his style to his age. He still applies pressure with his footwork, sometimes using a double jab to get inside, then throws wide hooks to the body or head. And if the opponent tries to attack first, Canelo has just a single counter ready, no longer the quick multi-punch combinations of his youth. Being technically better than his opponent is the core of Alvarez's confidence. That's why in fights, he sometimes stops attacking altogether, relying on head movement. It's his technical craft that gives him the belief he can always come forward and find a way to win. But the moment he faces someone technically superior, his confidence collapses. That's the only way to really break him mentally. Against Floyd, people said it was just because of youth, but the same strange, detached behavior appeared years later against Bivol. And now it happened again with Crawford. With all this in mind, a Canelo versus Crawford matchup no longer looks like a mismatch, but a very competitive fight. For the first time in his life, what Canelo had been doing to others for years, someone did to him. Crawford moved up in weight to exploit the holes in his technique and his age. And keep in mind, the ring was smaller than usual, making it easier for Canelo to cut it off and pressure Terence against the ropes. This was clear from the opening round. Canelo pressed forward but didn't attack, while Terence moved carefully, not rushing, trying to avoid being cornered. Crawford threw a few jabs to the head and body, more to measure distance than to land. Canelo responded with an overhand and a body hook. The first round was mostly reconnaissance, but Crawford was the more active in testing the distance and rhythm. Rounds 2 and 3 showed the fighters' game plans. Crawford used the jab heavily, like Bivol did, then shifted and tried to counter when Alvarez closed in, to earn Saul's respect. Meanwhile, Canelo abandoned the double jab he had been using in recent fights. Instead, he pressed forward with excellent footwork, cutting off Crawford's angles, feinting the jab, and suddenly attacking with body hooks or overhands. An unexpected approach from Alvarez, showing respect for Terence's skills by starting with the body before mixing in feints and headshots. But here was the problem. Crawford simply didn't let himself get hit. He kept his elbows tight, making Canelo's body attacks ineffective. When Saul went to the head, it looked more like frustration than a real setup. Crawford could read him easily. Terence quickly adapted, not just blocking the body shots, but catching them and firing back straight counters to the head before pivoting away. And just when it looked like things would slow down, Crawford pulled a Bivol move, suddenly launching attacks, breaking the rhythm. These bursts always drained Canelo, and this fight was no exception.
What surprised me was that it seemed like Alvarez started to get winded too early. I could really see the fatigue. After the second half, I saw it in his actions, in his eyes, in the way he moved. Did that surprise you or not?
No, it didn't surprise me, because I saw the same thing in his previous fights. In all of them, in probably all 3 of his last fights, it was the same thing. And I kind of tried to work like he does on the heavy bag. I thought, why does this happen to him? So, what was he doing? He goes after his opponent and just throws these wild swings, like 3 big shots. Bam, bam, bam. He doesn't get hit with any kind of counter combination. He takes a couple of breaths and then goes right back to throwing punches. But when you stand in front of the heavy bag and start throwing 3 hard punches with all your strength, it really takes a lot out of you. And if you miss your target, you waste even more energy. And if you swing and hit nothing but air, it drains you even more. And I noticed that when no one counters him, he feels comfortable. But as soon as someone starts firing back after those hard punches, he immediately gets flustered and starts breathing heavily. And basically, that's what happened here too. He would get tired after throwing his power shots. Of course, you land 3 big punches and want to take a breather, but then a counter comes flying right at you.
The deeper the fight went, the more Crawford's confidence grew. He stopped waiting to block and counter. Instead, he predicted Canelo's timing and threw counter hooks before Saul's punches even landed, following up with straight shots and footwork that spun Canelo around. At that point, Crawford knew the fight was his. He raised the pace, exchanged punches, and most importantly, refused to back up. Sometimes he let off flurries of jabs, then in pure Mexican style, grabbed Canelo's head to bang him inside, proving he wasn't smaller at all. In close quarters, Crawford came out on top. Unlike Alvarez, he could throw more than 2 to 3 punches without gassing. And when Saul clinched, Terence would turn him toward the ropes, showing that physically he wasn't outmatched either. After Crawford won every battlefield, Canelo fell into his usual pattern of frustration. And when he's frustrated, he leans on defensive moves to regain confidence. But Crawford didn't play along. Every time Saul tried to use head movement, Terence simply stopped and stepped back. Crawford made the fight as uncomfortable for Canelo as possible. On every range, he had the keys. In the clinch, he bullied Alvarez. And whenever Saul tried to fire himself up, Crawford fathered him, simply denying him the chance. That's why near the end of the fight, Canelo was looking off into the crowd, or to the sides. He looked like a guy who just lost 10 online games in a row and was trying not to smash his controller against the wall. Only in his case, it was 10 rounds in a row. To his credit, though, Canelo didn't just coast to the judge's decision. In the later rounds, he kept engaging in exchanges. But all his old tricks, the rear hand uppercut, jab feints, looping hooks around the guard, Crawford saw them all coming and had counters ready. A couple of times, Crawford rocked Saul like no one had before. Terence Crawford fought Canelo Alvarez like he was his biggest hater on the planet. He walked out to Mexican music, used classic dirty boxing tactics of the Mexicans against a Mexican, and did everything Saul hates, with a smile on his face. And when Canelo tried to touch gloves between rounds, Terence almost shoved him away. Crawford mentally ate him alive. He became the bully of the bully. We often talk about trash talk as part of the mental game in combat sports, but sometimes, without insults or theatrics, you can mentally break your opponent and make him lose himself. That's exactly what Terence Crawford did to Canelo Alvarez, and that's why he won. So what do you think? Will Saul Canelo Alvarez want a rematch with Terence Crawford? In the past, when Canelo lost to technically superior fighters, he refused rematches. Do you think this fight will be the exception?